At least 20 killed after military plane carrying banknotes crashes in Bolivia. At least 20 people have been killed and others injured after a Bolivian Air Force cargo plane crashed in the western city of El Alto, the country's authorities say. The incident happened at 18:15 local time, 22:15 Greenwich Mean Time, on Friday as the plane was arriving at El Alto's airport from the city of Santa Cruz, aviation officials said. It reportedly skidded off the runway and hit nearby vehicles. The Defense Ministry later confirmed its C-130 Hercules was involved and that it had been transporting banknotes to the Central Bank of Bolivia. There were 8 people aboard the plane, the Air Force commander said. Police fired tear gas to disperse crowds allegedly trying to take the scattered banknotes. Firefighters had given an earlier death toll of at least 15. Video footage showed the plane on the ground and badly damaged vehicles. In other videos, people could be seen running away from the tear gas and police officers, some holding shields, forming a line. Some in the crowds are seen throwing rocks. While news crews were covering the accident, individuals attempting to steal the transported money attacked the press with unusual violence, the National Association of Journalists of Bolivia said in a statement. It said a mobile TV unit was directly targeted, while other journalists were attacked with stones, suffering serious injuries while carrying out their work. The government-run Bolivian news agency reported that at least a dozen people were arrested for stealing banknotes. I want to make it clear to those who are trying to take money from the plane involved in this tragedy that this money has no legal value since it has not been issued by the central bank and does not have a serial number, and that attempting to use this money is a crime, the Minister of Defense, Marcelo Salinas, said. We also ask all those who are engaging in acts of vandalism in this area to refrain from doing so and to respect the mourning and grief we are experiencing at this difficult time. Bolivia's Air Force Commander Sergio Lora confirmed there were 8 crew members on board the plane, including cargo personnel and flight crew. Bolivia's health ministry said 31 people were injured in the incident. It also issued an urgent appeal for blood donations. El Alto International Airport was temporarily closed following the crash. My sister told me that she was in the car when the plane crashed. The plane's tire fell on the car, and my sister was injured because the impact of the tire hit her on the head, so we rushed her to the hospital, a man told the Reuters news agency. It was not immediately clear what caused the crash, but some witnesses said the weather at the time was treacherous. A heavy hailstorm was falling and there was lightning when the plane went down. A woman whose car was struck by the aircraft wreckage told the AFP news agency. An investigation into the incident is underway. Smoke over the highlands. A plain of promises falls in Bolivia. At dawn, the thin air above Bolivia shimmered with frost and anticipation. In the high plateau between mountains and sky, life moves to the rhythm of markets opening and buses coughing awake. On this particular morning, however, the rhythm was broken by a sound that did not belong, a low, uneven roar that sliced through the quiet like a blade. The aircraft was a military transport, its gray body heavy not with soldiers or supplies, but with tightly sealed cargo, banknotes bound for regional banks and public payrolls. Money meant movement, wages for teachers, pensions for the elderly, credit for farmers waiting to buy seed before the rains. It was, in a sense, a plane full of promises. Witnesses in a village outside the capital described the final seconds as both slow and sudden. The engine's whine dipped into a growl. A wing tilted. A streak of smoke trailed behind it like a torn ribbon. Then the mountains answered with a dull thunder, and a column of black rose into the pale sky. By mid-morning, officials confirmed the unimaginable. At least 20 people had been killed when the plane went down in rugged terrain outside La Paz. Rescue teams, battling altitude and wreckage still warm from impact, moved carefully across the scarred hillside. The smell of fuel lingered in the cold air, mixing with the metallic scent of twisted steel. The victims were not faceless statistics. They were crew members trained to navigate Bolivia's unforgiving geography, men and women who had flown across valleys carved by ancient rivers and over peaks crowned with snow. Some had families waiting for them at breakfast tables, phones charging beside chipped mugs of coffee. Others had plans for the weekend, a birthday celebration, a trip to visit parents in a neighboring province, a long-awaited day off. The irony was impossible to ignore. A flight carrying currency, symbols of stability and continuity, had ended in a catastrophe that would ripple through both finance and family. In the hours after the crash, authorities secured the site, mindful not only of evidence for investigators but also of the scattered cargo. Charred fragments of banknotes fluttered in the wind, blackened edges curling like fallen leaves. They were legal tender, yet in that moment they felt weightless, powerless against gravity and flame. In the plazas of La Paz, news spread quickly. Radios crackled. Shopkeepers paused to listen. The city, cradled in its bowl of mountains, seemed to hold its breath. Military officials addressed the nation with solemn expressions, promising a thorough investigation into what went wrong, whether mechanical failure, human error, or the merciless unpredictability of high-altitude weather. Bolivia's terrain is both breathtaking and brutal. Pilots speak of thin air that strains engines and sudden winds that turn routine flights into tests of instinct and endurance. Grief arrived in waves. Outside a modest home in El Alto, relatives gathered in silence as word came that one of the crew had not survived. A mother clutched a photograph, her son in uniform, proud and unsmiling. "He carried responsibility," she whispered, "and he carried hope." Her words echoed the larger truth, that this was not merely a logistical mission, but a thread in the fabric of national life. Economists began quietly calculating the practical impact. The destroyed banknotes could be reprinted. Systems exist for loss and replacement. Yet the human cost could not be balanced by numbers on a ledger. The loss of experienced personnel would be felt within the armed forces. The psychological shock would ripple through aviation units accustomed to risk, but not immune to tragedy. As the day wore on, the crash site became a tableau of contrasts. Soldiers stood in rigid formation while forensic teams bent low over debris. Helicopters hovered above, their blades beating a steady rhythm that felt almost ceremonial. Beyond the cordon, villagers watched from a distance, hats pulled low against the wind. Some crossed themselves. Others murmured prayers in Spanish and Aymara, blending faiths as seamlessly as Bolivia blends landscapes. Night fell early in the highlands. Candles flickered in windows across La Paz, tiny constellations mirroring the cold stars above. At a cathedral near the city center, a vigil drew families, officials, and strangers bound by shared sorrow. The cathedral bells tolled slowly, each note hanging in the air before dissolving into silence. In his address,